Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to another episode of the Game of Thrones podcast. I am your host, Carmine of Red Team Review, and I'm joined. You know what? Fuck it. Let's just skip the intro. This finale was absolute trash. It's probably the worst episode of Game of Thrones I have ever seen.
Whoa!
That's right.
Wow! You're really coming straight out of the gates.
Straight out of the gate. You know what's the one thing the one thing I did notice is that almost every single character that's left alive in the cast at this point that has appeared throughout the entire show, appeared throughout the last two seasons, appear in this episode with the exception of one character, which is the saving grace of this episode.
You're talking about the fact that you did not see any of Gilliflower.
Right. Gilly did not appear. I think it was out of the 15 or 16 cast members left, she was the only one not to appear. Yes.
Yeah, I'm trying to think about that because Podrick gets his 1 second. Tormund gets his 1 second.
You would think everybody would get a montage of what they're doing now, right? But no, Nobody gets a montage. Nobody gets anything. And guys, we're on SoundCloud and iTunes. You know the drill. I kind of just want to get into this, so let's get into this.
Yeah. It's weird. It's weird that they see. There's a lot of things in retrospect. Jon had his going away with Sam, which didn't really make sense considering they were heading in the same direction and all of that. And there was no reason to have a heartfelt goodbye, but it was the last time the two characters were ever on screen, and so they needed to have a heartfelt goodbye at that moment. Kind of like Jon had a really heartfelt goodbye to Gilly because that was Gilly's last scene, and then he said fuck all to Ghost because he was going to be reunited with Ghost. It's like nothing's natural with human reaction. It's all just part of the script. Oh God, this is going to be Jon and Sam's last scene, so we need to have a really heartfelt goodbye. And this is Jon and Gilly's last scene. We need to have a heartfelt goodbye. Jon and Ghost, fuck them.
Well, we're getting ahead of ourselves, but
yeah,
you're gonna love this. So this guy on Facebook, Donnie, he sums it up 100%. He says, "It's like Catelyn Stark wrote this last episode. Sansa's queen, Bran is king, Arya is doing whatever she wants to do, and Jon is exiled and forgotten." And he's 110% correct. It is like because if you guys remember back in season 1, episode 2, when Bran's still in the coma, Jon comes in and says goodbyes to Bran, and Catelyn's like, "I want you out, out." And everybody's like, "What did he do?"
It's funny when people are like, "Oh, it's gonna be a bittersweet ending." For the Starks, it's a fucking happy ending.
Yo,
everybody.
Remember an hour after the Red Wedding episode happened, everybody's like, "Oh my God." Peter Dinklage gets on Twitter and he says, "If you think this has a happy ending, you haven't been paying attention." Yes, we have, motherfucker.
If you think it has a happy ending, it has a completely happy ending.
It's almost like the showrunners went to every Chad Summerchild fan out there and asked them what they would love and want for the final episode for all these characters, and just gave them what they wanted.
I mean, it's weird. Yeah, it's weird. It's weird that even though I will say there's one exception, and even Dany haters out there, and there were a lot of Dany haters, but even Dany haters were like, no, they didn't do Daenerys right. Even if they believed in a Mad Queen theory, they didn't believe they did her right.
See, I wouldn't mind Daenerys' change if it came gradually ever since season 5, because season 5, actually no, since season 4. Actually, you know what? Season 5. Because Season 5 is when she's still in Meereen, and the Sons of the Harpy are giving her shit. And she's starting to get, fed up with it, and you start to see bits and pieces of her crack. Subtle, but there. Mm-hmm. That would have been fine if it was built up all the way to this season where it comes ahead. Where everyone's, where she's seeing daggers in every shadow. And quite frankly, she had every reason to be pissed off at everybody around her. Her hand of the queen was fucking up. Her spy master was spying on her and just being a douche. Sansa refusing to bend the knee and kind of almost setting up Jon to be king. I don't blame Dany for doing what she did. She got bad advice, and people around her were just generally awful, and Cersei was just using people against her. It was just a whole clusterfuck for Dany ever since she got to Westeros. And seeing Jon being loved over her, she's a stranger in this land, she feels isolated. It all made sense, but it should have been built up over the last 3 seasons.
So somebody sent me this today, and it was a Scientific American article, and they said why it's their theory on why Game of Thrones didn't work, and they said that the show shifted from being a sociological show to being a psychological show. And it's a really interesting concept.
Yes, send that to me later on Facebook. I actually want to read that.
So, but you know, the general gist is the first episodes are about how we act. The first seasons are about how we act based on our role in society, like what power we have, what agency we have, how our actions affect the community, and what the community will do in response. And even when you think of things like the Red Wedding isn't so much about Walder Frey's like psychology, though some people will really read into his whole like, oh, they're laughing at me. But it's more about like strategically, like how can our house gain power in this system, in this feudalistic structure where, you know, you've denied this wedding, and now how am I going to gain power and respect in the community? And so I go to Tywin, and you've got these complicated interactions of human beings. It's sociological. While the later ones are about people's feelings, like why does Jaime need to go back? Oh, he needs to go back to Cersei. He can't quit her. It's all like it's all the emotion that's inside him. Like, what's Dany doing? Oh, she's going psychotic. Like, you know, it's about her mindset. What's Jon thinking? Oh, he's feeling so sad. But nothing is about the relationship of people anymore and how it fits in the feudalistic structure. There's the sociology of it all falls apart. And you know, we've been criticizing this for years. But when we talk about it, it's like, oh, have they forgotten about, you know, Succession? Have they forgot that this is the Middle Ages? We start bringing these things up, but it's true that it's all symptomatic of they stopped looking at the show as relationships between people, and they started looking at the show as each person's human struggle individually as islands. And you know, that's great for acting work because, you know, the actors can feel it, but it doesn't really, like, you know, fit with like the plot and the story.
You know, it's funny, like, everybody. So you said like this is an article from Scientific American?
Yeah.
So it's funny, everybody across the spectrum, like you had this like one football player, I think it was Aaron Rodgers, who he hated the finale. I love this anime called Attack on Titan. The creator of Attack on Titan, he hated the finale. My buddy Dave, who thought Arya killing the Night King was the coolest thing ever, he hated the finale. If one thing is clear, this finale has brought everybody together to hate on it. And this is the one thing I said in my review. How come every single show that goes beyond 5 seasons starts to fucking suck? I don't get it. I really don't understand.
Well, some people would argue that, I mean, there are a few that aren't so bad, where like the drop off for the last seasons isn't bad. Like people would say that the last couple seasons of Star Trek: The Next Generation or something like didn't drop off, and some short series really drop off, like Battlestar, which I mean, I don't know if you watched Battlestar when it came out, but Battlestar was so beloved when it was going on. Like just, and then the last season was so horrible that everyone just kind of forgot about the show. It's amazing that the show dropped off out of the zeitgeist because it was something that everyone was talking about, and people were using the language from the show, and it was really everywhere, and then all of a sudden it wasn't remembered fondly, you know? It's kind of like how when The Hobbit came out, like people were really into The Hobbit, like, oh my gosh, The Hobbit's coming out, but then they were horrible, and so everyone's like, let's just forget about these things.
And that's kind of what I'm afraid of Game of Thrones, because Game of Thrones, there's a great story here. First couple of seasons were fantastic, but these last few seasons, I don't want it to be remembered by these last few seasons. I really don't. I would still argue that Season 5 was probably the last good season. Some people didn't like it that much, and yes, we all know, you know, the Sand Snakes, you know, like clap like seals. Everybody loves to mention how much the Sand Snakes suck. Yeah, whatever. Sand Snakes aside, Season 5 was still, in my opinion, pretty solid.
Yeah.
We got 2 dreaded episodes. It ended on a fantastic cliffhanger. You know, we had the Black Wedding. Like, there was a lot of good stuff in there that was just equally as shocking and intense and insane. But
by the way, that Scientific American article is entitled, and anyone that wants to look it up, it's called "The Real Reason Fans Hate the Last Season of Game of Thrones" on Scientific American. It's really, really
yeah,
cool.
I definitely want to check it out because everybody and their mothers on YouTube seems to have like a what went wrong with Game of Thrones the last. It's like the defining video.
There's some other interesting things. So someone posted a chart that I saw, which was the number of words per minute per episode for Game of Thrones.
Oh shit! Okay.
Yeah, and it is this trend line downward.
The number of words per minute.
Words per minute.
Like
it's just, I mean, you can see the very clear trend, just like down. So you're talking about the number of words per minute in the episode like plummets about 30 to 40% by the end of the show, which is just insane. And it's true. There's just so much dead time, and some people say, oh well, it's there's more action. There's more action scenes, and you can see those episodes. But even the episodes after that are not action aren't high. They're not anywhere close to season 1, and the style is just completely different. And I didn't realize how bad the writing was until I saw another post today where this one was called Good Subs, and this guy has taken scenes from season 8 and he has removed the dialogue, and instead he has subtitles on the bottom, and he's just put in his own subtitles, and oh my god, he's changed the language back to the way they're talking first season, and then he's just created like the tension between the characters. But this is just a random fan, and his writing is so phenomenally better, so much phenomenally better than what we saw in season 8. It's amazing.
This is a very common trend. I've gotten so many fucking emails and messages from people saying, "Hey, Carmine, please read my rewrite of season 8." A lot of times I just brush it off, but a few times I did actually read some of the stuff, and a lot of these fans have better endings for the characters, better dialogues for the characters than people paid. You have better stuff writing, like the whole Hound thing. And I'm sure you have like a plethora of more ideas. Then I'm sure you're gonna probably make a video on how you would fix season 8 coming up soon. Wink, wink, nudge, nudge.
Yeah.
So like people in the comments section themselves have better ideas on how to do things than people actually paid to do it. And before we get into that, I did want to mention real quick, what are your thoughts on the petition that over 1 million people have signed to redo season 8 with competent writers?
I mean, it's a waste of time.
It is a waste of time.
It's not going to happen. It's done. It's like somebody going back and redoing the Phantom Menace. Like, okay, like, not going to happen.
It's not going to happen. HBO put in $90 million, $90. It sounds like it. $90 million for season 8, and there's no way. Like I said, I have a buddy of mine. He does work for HBO. He does graphic designing. He told me, like, the higher ups, the way they feel about the ending of season 8 and season 8 in general is bittersweet because they're fans of the show as well, and they were near begging Dave and Dan to just have more time and more money to do 10 episodes. They didn't want to do it. Okay, fine. They're fans of the show too, but it's bittersweet because they made a lot of money off season 8. However, at the same time, it sucks. So what are you going to do? Like, you can't... And the petition has been making the rounds. News stations have been picking it up, newspapers as well, and they've been asking some of the actors. This is what Kit Harington had to say. Kit Harington says, "Whatever critic spends half an hour writing about this season and makes their judgment on it, in my head they can go fuck themselves," he tells Esquire, "because I know how much work was put into this." Sophie Turner says, So many people worked so hard on it, and for people just to rubbish it because it's not what they wanted to see is just disrespectful. Jacob Anderson, who plays Grey Worm, he says it's very rude, and there are a lot of people who worked very hard on it. You see a trend here? So
Yeah.
the petition itself specifically states that Dave and Dan are trash writers and they want better writers. The actors here are defending the people, like, behind the scenes. Like, I'm sure every fan, 99.9% of every single fan who had a problem with Season 8 understands that this is Dave and Dan's fault. Not the people who do costumes, not the fucking composer of the music, not the set guys, not the weapon people, not the costume guys, the cinematographers. It's all Dave and Dan. Because, I even said this in my review, the throne room scene between Jon and Dany looked absolutely gorgeous.
Oh, I mean... Look, the cinematographers, the actors, the music, the filming, like, I mean, other than it being dark, you know, in some episodes, no one has any complaints. It's just the writing. It's just the dialogue. That's the thing. It's just the dialogue. And general plot points. But that's, I can't even, you know, that's the thing is they're trying to divert it. It's just generally straw manning an argument. When you don't have straw manning an argument is, you know, it's when you can't argue a point, you choose a weaker point and you argue against it. You know, when you're like, you know, if you're having an argument and you're like, you know, I think you know, police shouldn't you know, beat up people so much, and then someone's like, oh, well, I guess we just shouldn't have police. When you're like, well, no, I didn't argue that at all. So it's like, you know, it's the same thing. Well, there should be better writing on Game of Thrones. Oh, but people worked really hard. Well, no one said people weren't working hard. Or people are saying specifically that that the writing is bad. That's what's bad. It's so bad. But I'm just like real simple, like changing the language and creating some, like, you know, tension between characters and like a reason for dialogue to be happening. Not awkward scenes of people moving chairs or awkward silence with you know, Tyrion and Grey Worm and Missandei, or, you know, awkward silence of people eating at a dinner.
All right, well, let's get into the episode. And there's something that I rarely agree with you on, and is that there's a lot of people wasting time. But I have to agree with you on with this on here. There's a lot of wasting time. It's almost as though they were trying to fill the episode with just stuff to fill a certain time gap.
Yeah. What happened? Do you remember the news story is that, oh, you know, each one of these episodes is going to be like a feature film. Each one of them is going to be like an hour and a half, 2 hours. And everybody's like, oh, yeah, so it's only 6 episodes, but we're getting just as much. We're getting 10 hours, just like a regular season. They just say it's only 6. No, we didn't. They weren't extra long.
This is something I've been saying for like the past few seasons. I always fucking hate when people say, Carmine, it's like an over an hour long. No, it's not. They're including the behind the scenes stuff. They're including the ending credits, the opening credits, the last time on Game of Thrones. When you really remove all that stuff, really what it is just 45 minutes.
Right, and of that 45 minutes, we get, like I say, there was 7.5 minutes of Tyrion walking at the beginning of this episode.
Oh God, yeah. Yeah, Tyrion walking, you know? A lot of staring. Let me ask you a question, though, because this is something I asked people on Twitter. Even people who hated this episode, they thought this was a really cool scene. Well, Daenerys comes off of Drogon, and she's walking forth, and Drogon flies up. When Drogon's wings flap, for a second, if you pause it looks like Dany has wings. Did you think that was lame?
I thought it was... Here's the thing, is that scene looked cool. The ridiculous scene of Drogon underneath the snow. Some people are like, it's ash. It's snow, and it started snowing, so it's snow and ash. Smash? I don't know. Like, that's a cool looking scene, even though it doesn't make sense. There's a lot of cool looking scenes. Drogon burning the Iron Throne is supposed to look cool, but it's very clear that they had a bunch of like cool looking vignettes, and then they just decided that they're going to transition to each one, thinking that these iconic moments were going to carry the episode. That because Tyrion, they made such a big deal of Tyrion throwing that pin down the stairs. Like anyone cared. It was like, oh, this huge stairs, and then they focus on that pin going dunk, 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 dunk. Who cares if Tyrion, take a look at how much time Edmure takes to throw his pin. It's nothing, And that's the scene that's supposed to parallel. He just takes the pin and goes.
You mean Eddard?
I'm sorry, Eddard, not Edmure. But in first season, it's not this epic, he threw the pin. Bah! No one cares. It was a stupid, he didn't even have the position anyway because he'd already betrayed Dany. She was going to take it away from him, but they tried to create all this gravitas to these things that shouldn't have had gravitas.
They brought in some people to specifically make sure that there was enough time wasted to fill that gap, that 2-hour gap.
I mean, they went heavy on the cinematography, hoping that it would cover for everything else. And the cinematography was fine. Look, I wasn't too impressed by the dragon wing thing. I don't think it did anything for me one way or the other. If it's not part of the story and doesn't mean anything to me, I mean, was it supposed to be some sort of Dany is a dragon?
Or Dany's the devil, I guess?
Or Dany, is that what we're doing? It's a little heavy-handed. I got that she's a dragon or evil. Yeah, she burned a city down. We got it. I mean, if it led to something else, it led to Jon's psychology of thinking that she was evil, and then it turns out she wasn't evil, and you're like, oh, I see why Jon went that direction.
Well, as far as Jon knows, Dany is evil because she burned a city down, not because she wants to take over the world, because when she gets off Drogon's back, she makes that speech in High Valyrian. However, 2/3 of her entire forces don't speak High Valyrian. You made this great point. I love how you noticed this specifically, and I didn't even catch it. That's a great point. The Dothraki, they don't speak High Valyrian. The Westerosi forces, they don't know what the fuck she's saying. Right. I'm sure Arya might know what she's saying, maybe.
Maybe, but we have no evidence of it.
Right.
Yes, she might have been learning language at the House of Black and White. She certainly knows Braavosi, but we have no evidence that she does. I mean, Arya, of all the people, Arya would be the one that would know, but because we're specifically told that Tyrion's High Valyrian is crap over and over again. Jon certainly doesn't speak it. So I mean, it's either he listened to her. I don't know. So you ever listen to the band Tool?
No.
So on one of Tool's albums, they have a track where this guy is speaking German as if he's at a rally, and he's speaking and he's like da ya 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 da da, and there's this crowd cheering, and it sounds like some sort of Hitler kind of thing. But it turns out he's actually reciting the directions for baking a cake. Okay. And so it's this big joke, right? Yeah. And so Jon and Tyrion, I guess only from how she sounded and him perhaps hearing the word Winterfell would he have ever gotten anything from that.
I just love how you caught it, man. You made a great point. They're not bilingual. The Dothraki, they don't speak it. That's a great point. Only the Unsullied understood what she was saying.
I mean, that was the funny thing, because she's like from Winterfell to Old Town. You're like, okay, but Winterfell bent the knee. It's part of the kingdom, right? I mean, unless Sansa causes trouble. Old Town, not a problem. And then she's from Lannisport, which again, Tyrion is the only person that we know who's now a frickin' Lannister, so I guess he has Casterly Rock, so that's already submitted, to Karth. Are they really going all the way fucking back to Karth to liberate Karth?
Liberate Karth from what? Karth seemed pretty liberated.
Well, yeah, that's the thing. The leaders all died. We have no idea what Karth is doing. Karth didn't. It didn't have slavery that we saw, and the leaders were all murdered so we have no idea.
So that whole speech thing, one of the things I found ridiculous, I've never rolled my eyes so hard in a Game of Thrones episode than I did this one. The first eye roll was when Jon and Dany have that little stare, they're taking Tyrion away, Jon's watching her walk off. Arya all of a sudden appears like Batman. Like, she's Wolverine and Batman. I thought that was so fucking lame.
And almost every review that I saw of like criticized Arya's whole I know a killer when I see one. Like every single review like was just like, really? Like even Game of Thrones, which is like which I watch.
What are they called? Gay of Thrones?
Game of Thrones is hilarious.
Spell that Gay, Gay of Thrones?
Gay, yeah, Game of Thrones. It's the guy from Queer Eye. Well, he did this series and then he got noticed, and so they gave him position on Queer Eye, and he's fucking hilarious. But he does reviews of all the Game of Thrones episodes. And they're just ridiculous because they have nothing to do with the episode at all. He just kind of, if somebody is getting burned by a dragon, he'd be like, and then everyone got a facial, and like okay. But he was.
but the main complaint of Arya for this entire season was, what was the point of her faceless men training? Because she didn't even use a good chunk of like the abilities she acquired.
She used her face changing for the phrase. That's it. And in fact, it's been pointed out that Walder Frey was a much more formidable villain than the Night King or Dany or any of these people.
How so? Like, Walder Frey is a much more formidable villain.
Well, I mean, you think like how many Starks did the Night King kill?
0.
Like things like that. I mean, he killed Ed. I suppose that's like the closest you're gonna get. He killed Jorah, Theon, things like that. But like he didn't really kill, no main characters. While Walder Frey killed Catelyn and Robb.
And Robb's wife, like and Robb's unborn child.
Robb's wife, and Robb's unborn child, yeah.
Yeah, and we'll get to the Night King in a minute, because there was something you told me in our spoiler cast episode that did not come true, which I was super bummed out about.
Oh, yeah.
So after we get that scene with Arya saying that stupid shit, which I really hated Arya this entire season. The fact that she didn't even use any of her faceless men. She did use the training. She was, going bonkers with the staff during the Battle of Winterfell. But beyond that, like the faceless men abilities just to change faces, people were saying, well, she didn't even use any of that. Like, I'll defend her here. Where is she really going to use it here? I guess she was going to use it. She should have used it during like the sneaking into King's Landing thing, but then she wouldn't have had that scene with the Hound. So,
I mean, do you think, would you have liked the Battle of Winterfell episode more if, all of the White Walkers are standing around and then she rips off her face and she's one of them and she stabs the Night King? Do you think that would have been better than out of fucking nowhere leap? Arya?
I think.
You'd still be like, oh, fuck it.
Arya kills one of the White Walker generals, rips off its face, poses as one, waits for the Night King to appear, and then takes off the face and stabs the Night King.
No, I mean, it would have to be like a little different. Like, let's say one gets trapped, like she's fighting one in a corridor and it gets trapped under some rocks or something. And then it's trapped and it can't move. And then it like cuts away. And then in the last scene, like everyone's closing in and you think that Bran's going to die. And then all of a sudden Bran, like one of the guys rips off his face and it's Arya and she stabs the Night King.
That would make no sense. That makes equally no sense as how fucking...
I know, because you can't peel off their... Well, I mean, you can't... I don't know how you
probably can't peel off their face, but even if you did, the Night King has some kind of connection to them, as we saw, so he would know something's off. So that's as equally as dumb, maybe more dumb, than Arya jumping so fucking far.
But it'd be her using her abilities, at least. That was the idea.
I guess she's using her abilities now... because the way she's sneaking around, I guess the Faceless Men taught her to step lightly. Light of foot. I don't.
Or how about it's how about this? How about all the torches go out and it's super dark and she kills him in the dark.
So all the torches go out and she kills him in the dark. But he's the Night King. He's the king of the night. Darkness is his domain.
Yeah, she's just not designed. She's just not designed for it. She didn't. That's the thing, is she didn't use it really in her abilities. Except, I mean, leaping super high out of nowhere isn't necessarily the. I don't know. She blends into a tree somehow. She's like camoed into a tree.
She's like that. What's that bastard kid that in the books he witnessed the.
Yeah,
Pike?
he like she's like Wex Pike. Yeah, she pulls that.
Oh my god, it's funny too because Maisie Williams said in an interview that she would have liked it if Arya died while killing Cersei, which the way I agree with that. Her revenge, you know, she was so consumed by revenge that in the end it really took her out. However, I don't want her killing the Night King and Cersei. If anything, I would like Theon to kill the Night King. He would be the prince that was promised. He was Prince of Winterfell. I have a whole... Yeah. I want to do a video on it later. I don't know, maybe I'll discuss it with you as well. But I would love it for Theon to kill the Night King, and then Arya goes and kills Cersei, and then she dies somehow along the way.
So one of my favorite series of all time is Angel, and one of the reasons I really liked it was I was watching the sort of, you know, director commentary from Joss Whedon, and he said that one of the big things that he believed is that there was no gain without sacrifice. Mm-hmm. That anytime Angel wins, he has to lose something nearly equal in return. In order to, it's only a slight win, you know? So like, you know, he has to lose something. And that was kind of like, and, you know, I went through and I was like, wow, that's really true. And it's something that made Angel a really compelling show. But I realized that like the Starks, you know, they just didn't lose enough later on. They lost a lot in the early seasons, the ones that George wrote. Mm-hmm. But I thought that, okay, had Arya stab the Night King, but say like the arm that the Night King grabbed, let's say it got frostbite and she had to have that arm amputated.
Oh yeah.
Like you know, something that she lost something as a sacrifice. Because really, I mean, our main characters didn't lose much. I mean, Dany lost Jorah. And Sansa, who only started liking Theon recently, lost Theon. But
it's funny you mentioned Jorah too, because there was an interview with one of the writers where he said that he wanted Jorah to survive towards the very end, but it wouldn't make any sense logically, which makes me laugh. Like, logically, come on, guys, just now you're just trolling. Shut the fuck up. But apparently, the ending they kind of wanted for Jorah was Jorah would survive until the very end and would join the Night's Watch with Jon. Now, I know this is in the books. Doesn't Jeor Mormont tell Sam that he wants Jorah to join the Night's Watch?
He does. It's a very interesting. It's a very interesting situation.
But does he say it in the show?
He does not say it in the show.
Right, so that they were right. It wouldn't make any sense. Not to mention, why the fuck would Jorah join the Night's Watch?
No, not without the command from his father. He wouldn't do it.
Right.
Because I mean, he had the opportunity, and he ran to the free, you know, away. So.
But why would he do it in the show? Even if he survived the Battle of Winterfell, why would he do it in general? If anything, he would want to kill Jon Snow because he's so attached to Daenerys.
Yeah. The Jorah thing is super interesting in the book. Just as a quick tangent, because Jeor makes this command and he says it to Sam, but Gilly is next to him, and then they head, you know, to Old Town, and then Sam goes inside the Citadel, and Marwyn gets on his ship, the same ship, and goes to Slaver's Bay, and we don't know what happens to Gilly, and so book Gilly. We're not sure if she was left behind in Old Town, or if she is off to Slaver's Bay, which means that there's potential that Gilly could meet Jorah and communicate Jeor's last dying
Do you
wish.
really think Sam is that neglectful that he would leave Gilly on the fucking ship?
I mean, he was kind of hypnotized by a glass candle, so.
Oh, okay. Glass candle.
Yeah.
I love your like explanation for everything. It's either glass candle or Weirwood net.
Well, no, I mean, what happens is, in the book, he's getting off the ship and he doesn't know where to to leave Gilly. So he goes up to the ship's captain and he's like, hey, are you going to be unloading for a long time? And they're like, yes, we'll be unloading for like 2 days. And he's like, okay, Gilly can stay here? And they're like, sure, no problem. And he's like, okay, cool. And then he goes to the Citadel and he meets Sorella Sand and she brings him to Marwyn. And Marwyn like talks to him real quick and he's like, anyway, I gotta get going to Slaver's Bay. I'm gonna take the same ship that you took. I'm out of here. And Sam's like, huh. And he like looks into the glass candle and then he looks out the window and like the sun is set. And he's like, huh. And then that's kind of like where the chapter ends. And it's strange because the ship captain said, I'm going to stick around for a while. But then Marwyn's like, I'm leaving immediately on your ship. So there's a good reason why Sam left Gilly there because he thought that he'd have time. But then if Marwyn goes onto that ship and is like, we're leaving now, he's got Gilly. But we have no idea. I mean, maybe he kicked Gilly off. Like, why would you want to take Gilly with you? But, you know, so it's weird stuff.
So the next thing we get is probably my favorite scene in this entire episode, is the conversation between Jon and Tyrion. Now, Jon and Tyrion, I felt like this was a conversation between fans of the show arguing with each other, because this is something I always see in the comment section, people arguing for Dany, arguing against Dany, blah, 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 blah. And I know you weren't a big fan of this conversation, and to be frank, out of all the conversations we have seen in Season 8, this is probably one of my least favorite. But in this episode, it has to be the best scene because it's the least dumb scene. It really is. If you think about it.
It is the least, I mean, I'll grant you it's the least dumb scene. I mean, it's the least dumb scene. Mm-hmm. I mean, I can't think of anything because all the rest of the scenes are so horrible. But yeah, I mean, they spend a lot of time flushing out ideas. You know, Tyrion is like there's not much logic to what Tyrion's saying, but he's kind of throwing a bunch of shit at the wall and hoping something sticks, and eventually something does, because he makes a lot of really disparate arguments that none of which are super logical. But I don't know. He's I guess you could justify it by saying, oh, he's panicked and he's just trying any angle to get Jon to kill Dany.
Right.
But he goes over. He makes his argument,
and it does work. He does convince Jon to some extent to kill Dany, and then we see Jon heading over to the Red Keep and the throne room. And once again, this scene is very beautiful. I love how it's shot. I love where everybody's placed. Dany finally touches the throne. We see the vision from season 2.
It's really weird because when it started raining ash last episode, I actually thought, wow, that's really clever that, in the vision we think it's snow. And then
winter's finally come.
For it to be ash is really clever subversion of that. But then it actually did start snowing, and you can very clearly tell it's.
Well, is it confirmed as snow? Because
yeah, I mean you can see the crystallized snow on the throne. I mean it's. And in the vision, you can hear her feet crunching. But had they not, years ago, had they done the vision and you couldn't tell if it was snow and there wasn't the crunching, and then and it was ash, it would have been really clever. But I don't know. They kind of hedged their bets and made it both snow and ash at the same time.
They also kind of fucked themselves in the ass a little by, that would have been a great subversion of expectations, because we did think originally it was snow, but it was ash, but now it's a combination of both. You should have just left it at ash.
Right. Like, had it just been ash, it would have been really clever.
Yeah.
And I would have probably would have forgave the crunching in the vision and be like, well, the vision was slightly wrong. Visions are often slightly wrong. Like, Dany never met Drogo in a tent north of the wall, and that was one of her visions. So, but
I mean, well, to be fair, yeah. She never met Drogo at the end of the wall. But I mean, you could stretch it out so far and thin that her meeting Drogo and their son is the afterlife, and going beyond the wall is Jon's journey. You could really stretch it, but yeah. It's something.
It's something.
We could see Jon killing Dany a mile away. Game of Thrones, this is something I've argued. Game of Thrones is great when you don't expect it, something.
So it was great up to season 3. I guess some people didn't know that Oberyn was going to die. They really thought that they introduced Oberyn as this big character. So I think some people were still surprised at Oberyn's death. But There's not many surprises after that. I suppose I was truly surprised at Doran Martell and Trystane getting killed. That I did not see coming.
Well, did you see coming Stannis burning Shireen?
I guess not.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. No, I didn't see that. I didn't see that coming. No, I didn't see there's little things. I didn't think that mother was going to die, things like that. But there weren't too many. There weren't too many. I mean, there's so much plot. Like for the big five, like Jon, Dany, Jaime, Cersei, Tyrion, you knew they were safe in every single scene, and nothing would happen to them of any significance. I mean, they even killed Jon, and everybody's like, he's coming back.
Yeah.
Everyone knew that he was coming back. You can't keep him dead.
But he kills Dany here. We all saw it coming a mile away. I saw it coming a mile away. I would have liked it if it was, if at one point he lets her go, he doesn't stab her. He lets her go, and he's trying desperately to believe that, she's not as insane as Tyrion's making her out to be. But no, he kills her. And Drogon throws a tantrum. Now, when you told me this in the spoiler cast episode, I was like, he just flies off. But apparently, no, he flies off with her after melting the throne. Him melting the throne was so dumb, it's almost like he read the script.
Yeah. I mean, it's so heavy-handed.
Mm-hmm.
It's so heavy-handed.
Makes no fucking sense as to why he would give a fuck.
Right. I mean, had he... Here's the thing, is if he was going to do something, if I wanted to make that scene, and I wanted to symbolically melt the Iron Throne, I want that in there, I wouldn't have the dragon illogically just blast at it as if he understands, monarchy. I would have him, the dragon going nuts, bashing down walls, throwing flames in every direction. Jon starts jumping, in a hole, missing the flames. The dragon's just going nuts, and he destroys the throne that way.
Yeah, and it would draw the attention of the Unsullied, who see the destruction going on all over the place.
Right. Then I would accept it. Then you can go, oh, well, and symbolically the Iron Throne was destroyed. Mm-hmm. But instead, it's just him being, so pointed. I'm not going to kill you. I'm going to kill the Iron Throne because I hate the fact that all of these people battled for this and it ended up killing my mother. It's just
and
weird.
Then he grabs her body and flies off east. I just don't have any words. That's just so fucking stupid. It really is. It really is so fucking stupid.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know what... I mean, some people thought, okay, what if they had a last scene where Drogon lands, somewhere off in the Dothraki Sea in an isolated part, and there's just this clutch of eggs.
Yeah.
Or something, but no. But weirdly, Bran wants to find him. We'll get to that later, but that's a really weird, interesting line that I'm surprised they had. But...
Well, Bran seems to... Yeah, we'll get to it. But Bran seems to know where everything is all the time, except for magical creatures. Have you noticed this?
He's no Newt Scamander.
Yeah, essentially.
He doesn't know, magical creatures and where to find them. He is the exact opposite. I mean, his omnipotence is... I mean, he can see the future except when he can't, right?
That's why if you're going to have these powers, you have to, have set of rules to them of what they can and can't do. I can understand if he can't see magical creatures. He has to warg into normal creatures to spot out and spy on magical creatures, such as, the White Walkers are, magical in their own way, and you have to use ravens or crows or whatever to go spy on them beyond the wall.
But they said, he said, will Dragonfire kill the Night King? And he's like, I don't know. No one's ever tried. And so that makes it sound like he only knows the past, but we specifically see that he's been given glimpses of the future.
Right.
So he knows some of the future and all of the past?
Well, that leads us into the next scene, which is Tyrion's trial. Now, you made it seem like Grey Worm has all the power here. I would argue, who the fuck is Grey Worm?
Grey Worm has control, because he was named Master of War, so he has control over the Dothraki and the Unsullied. And so he's got control over, the largest army in Westeros, by far. Like we're told that the Northern forces, we're once told that the Northern forces there's 10,000, and then Sansa later says there's 20,000, and then we find out half of them died. So at best you're talking between 5 and 10,000 Northerners.
I wouldn't say 5. I'll argue at least 3 to 5,000.
Right. I mean, you're saying it's going to be even smaller.
Yeah.
The Unsullied, so there's about half of them, maybe under half of them left. So maybe there's 4,000 Unsullied. The Dothraki, you're talking like 20,000 Dothraki left. I mean, there should be just a massive army. Now, had something else happened, had they said, oh, Sweet Robin supplemented like the Northern forces with more Vale lords, that would have been different. Then I would have been like, oh, like Bronzehound Royce and Sweet Robin like are forcing something. But no, they don't mention that. It's just the Unsullied and the Dothraki have control of King's Landing, and that there's a Northern army outside. Well, fuck the Northern army. The Northern army is like small and tired. It's been through a million fucking wars. Like, had it been any other army, I would have been like, oh, that works. Any other army.
And I like details like this. I like knowing like troop composition of like each forces. Like I like knowing stuff like this, and they've been very inconsistent on it.
Right. Had they said like, oh, House Tarly's forces and and the more Vale forces or something, anything, make up a house. Just
make up a house.
Or just say the High Towers. Mm-hmm. Like if the High Tower army is out there, it doesn't matter. Like, just don't say don't keep pulling these Northern forces out of your ass like over and over and over. Like, how many Northern forces can get killed?
Well, we get to Tyrion's trial, and for some reason he's allowed to speak, even though Grey Worm is telling him to shut the fuck up. And also, Grey Worm is allowing them to like do their own thing and on how to enact punishment.
It doesn't make any sense.
It really doesn't.
He should have killed them all immediately. They should have been in a blind rage.
Yeah.
Just like they were in a blind rage earlier that day. Like killing innocents. Like, let's kill innocents, but let's not kill guilty.
I would love it if Tyrion, just to wrap it up, because he's done it already twice. And we all know everything. It always comes in threes. I would love it if Tyrion demanded a trial by combat, and he chose Jon Snow as his champion. And it would be like a little of the final boss battle would be Jon versus Grey Worm. And then I guess you could have Jon choosing to spare Grey Worm. I guess, the fight is over. He won. Blah blah blah. No more need to shed any blood or whatever. And Grey Worm not being satisfied, so I guess Jon says he'll take the black. And I guess that'll satisfy Grey Worm. I still don't get why does Grey Worm care about Jon taking the black? Because why does it matter?
I mean, that's the thing, and he's not even there to enforce it. I came up with some explanations on how it would be enforced that I'm gonna have in my Q&A video, but it's a long stretch. Like it's ridiculous that Grey Worm sticks around for weeks, because if he didn't care, he didn't care. He should have fucked off. But instead, it's like, I'm gonna stick around for weeks to ensure that justice is done, and no justice is done. Jon gets to go back to the Wall, where he chose to live willingly anyway, and then fucks off. I imagine he's deserting at the end. Did you get that? So there's different interpretations. Some people interpret it as, no, he's only temporarily letting the wildlings go north, and other people are like, no, he's totally deserting the Night's Watch then and there. But so he gets neither Jon nor Tyrion got any punishment.
It's funny, too, because it doesn't matter. Grey Worm's going to die the moment he lands on Noth, because...
Right. I mean, granted, they never established in the show that it was that.
The butterfly fever?
The butterfly fever.
Yeah, so for the audience who doesn't know what the fuck butterfly fever is, apparently Noth has these species of butterflies. Their wings are as big as your palm. And if you stick around long enough, they come out during the day, and apparently they, poison you, and you die fairly soon. That's why when slavers come to Noth, they do so during the nighttime, because the butterflies are daytime creatures.
Yeah.
But they don't know that, so they're going to Noth anyways, and the Nothi are completely immune to this, but outsiders are not. So
now, to be fair, there should be some Nothi in the Unsullied army, And those guys should be like, dude, you guys are all, like, anyone that's not from Noth who's immune is going to die. So, I mean, they should know. Certainly, I mean, first of all, in the book, like, Missandei's brothers are unsullied. But there's certainly going to be Nothi in the Unsullied army.
Not that many, though. So once again, a good chunk of them will die.
There just needs to be one. There just needs to be one to be like, dude, guys, let's not, like, I love you guys. Let's not go to Noth. You're going to die. Now, so, and obviously the writers didn't know that and weren't writing that. They're writing some, like, beautiful beats that they're all going to retirement on a beautiful beach.
And that's fine. But the whole Great Council scene was fucking stupid. First off, you have maybe 3 representatives from each region. Not even. The Ironborn and the Dornish only get 1 representative, which is fine. They're their own thing. But the one thing that really bugs me, because I'm a details guy and I'm a lore guy, yeah. I wanted to know all the lords that were there. And there are a lot of unnamed lords that were there. There's like an unnamed River Lord. There was a one named Storm Lord. But the one thing that really pisses me off...
he was named?
Yes. Lord Un. U-N-E.
Huh.
But yeah, I have no fucking. Who fucking cares?
Yeah, there was one guy that had a Stark looking cloak on, but who knows where he'd be from. And then there was one guy with the veil, and one guy with the Stormlands, and one guy. Was there 4 extra random fucks?
Who fucking cares?
Yeah.
The problem I have with this is that there needs to be way more representatives here, and I get it, like the audience wouldn't care about, like, minor lords from other houses.
Right.
But you would think that there would be way more, at least 20 more lords in attendance.
Yeah.
Because it really matters.
And you didn't need Arya in that scene.
You did not.
You know?
Like, who the fuck cares about Arya? Her opinion means nothing.
Right. And I mean, come up with some other reason for Bran to be there. You know, like, why is Bran here? Well, some people think he's the true Lord of Winterfell. Oh. You know, something like that, you know?
And, once again, I felt there should have been way more people. I felt more people should have had more lines and more dialogue. Gendry is the new Stormlord. Yara is the new Queen of the Iron Islands. The new Dornish Prince, who we know nothing about. Poor guy. I think he said something in, like, an interview that he watched clips of Oberyn, Pedro Pascal's Oberyn, but it didn't matter because he didn't even get like 2 minutes of screen time.
Yeah, I mean he did a great job with his body language. I mean I was watching the actors that had no lines. Like I was watching Sweet Robin, and I was like, you know, considering they gave him no lines, he like did the best he could. Like with what he did, like when they're like, you know, oh, democracy, and they all have to be like, what, you know, and you're like, oh, you know, character actors, they do what they can, they try to, you know, have the emotion. But yeah, it was rough because there's so many things that don't make sense, like them saying that the Tyrells are all gone when we specifically hear about Tyrell cousins in early seasons. You know, and like, oh, those lands.
You and your Tyrell cousins.
No, but it's just like those lands are empty now. Why would they be empty? Because you killed, like,
the family,
like
all the people got up and left.
You know, 4 people. The Reach is supposedly the most populous kingdom. Like, why would it's just? And I mean, also like killing off the Freys never made sense to me. Like, why wouldn't there be any Freys still alive? Like, they had children, didn't they?
Female Freys.
Yeah, 1 female Freys. 2 children. Like, there's...
Well, to be fair, we kind of hate the Freys now at this point. The Riverlands hate them, so they probably got chased out.
I mean, you know, dispossessed by Edmure, maybe, but at least
the fact that they even brought Edmure back, I'm actually kind of happy about that, but it's just...
Oh, it's fantastic to see Edmure and Sweet Robin. It was.
Yeah. By the way, fantastic. Sweet Robin, I'm assuming he's eating whatever you fucking ate to be that big, because goddamn, that fucking kid got huge. He got huge.
Good old Lino, yeah.
I'm pretty sure he's gonna start the Vale basketball team, because my god, he grew so fucking big, dude. I almost didn't recognize. I'm like, who the fuck is that kid? Who's next to? Oh, is that Sweet Robin? Get out of here.
Yeah, no, and they didn't even like do his makeup to make him look sickly. They made he look healthy as anything. You know, so
was he ever sickly in the show? I don't think so.
No, but even when they showed him, like, so the last time we saw him was when Littlefinger was dropping off that falcon. Mm-hmm. And you know, they put darkness under his eyes and made him look like he had a cold or something, you know. And this, they're just like, no, he's gonna look healthy and fine. Mm-hmm. You know.
He grew out of it.
So now everyone's he's like no longer Sweet Robin, he's Suave Robin.
So, okay, so let's get into the fucking bullshit meat of this episode. So, by the way, when you say that Samuel Tarly is George R.R. Martin, when Samuel says the thing about democracy, I really did see it there.
Yeah. There's certain things that ring of George R.R. Martin here. Like, as stupid as Tyrion's, like, story thing, like, what binds us together is stories, and who has the best story? Like, that's very George R.R. Martin, even though it doesn't, like, I hope he writes it better than that. Yeah. But that's a very George R.R. Martin idea. So you can kind of you know, sense that.
So Tyrion, who is being put on trial, why does anybody in attendance besides Sansa give a shit about what Tyrion has to say? Edmure Tully should hate Tyrion.
Everyone should hate Tyrion.
Everyone should hate Tyrion simply because he's a fucking
Tyrion.
Lannister.
Yeah. Either because he's a Lannister or because he killed frickin' Daenerys. Mm-hmm. Like Grey Worm, like, you could argue that you're keeping that, you know, we couldn't kill Jon because of the Northern Army. But why would you be keeping Tyrion alive? Like, there's no reason.
Tyrion killed Daenerys?
Well, Tyrion conspired to kill Daenerys.
Right.
I mean, first of all, so there was a jump in knowledge. So in that, you know, Jon kills Dany in privacy, and so we have no idea why Grey Worm knows everything. But apparently he knows that Jon killed Dany and that Tyrion betrayed Dany. So if he knows that Tyrion betrayed her, because Tyrion announces, like, everybody hates me because I betrayed her, then he must know that he, like, conspired, you know, to kill her and things like that. He should have just killed Tyrion for his participation. And, you know, he's keeping Jon alive because he has to because of this Northern Army. But there's no Westerland army. They executed all of them earlier in the episode. So there's no reason. In fact, wouldn't have been so much more a much more powerful scene if Tyrion wouldn't shut up and Grey Worm just goes over to him and slits his throat. No, I'm being completely serious. He slits his throat and then he's like, now, you know, or, you know, who else wants to talk? And then Davos gets up and he starts talking, or Sam. You know, like, we have other wise characters to communicate.
Yeah, but they're not fan favorites. Davos is not a fan favorite. Samuel Tarly's not a fan favorite.
But that's the thing is that they overdid it. Like, I don't know anyone that liked how much Tyrion was talking. Everyone was like, why is Tyrion commanding this situation?
Well, Tyrion is, I guess you could argue that he's always had a habit of doing that. Had a habit of, he's always had the talent to grab people's attention. Remember, like, if you think back to, like, all his scenes, he always knows how to, like, bring the room to attention. I mean, when he and Bronn are walking out of the Vale, they get ambushed by the mountain clans, and he's able to hold off Shagga, son of Dolph. Yeah. So I guess you could argue that, but everybody in there should hate him or have no feelings towards him whatsoever. The only person in there who I guess should like him kinda is Sansa and maybe Davos.
I don't even know how he's going to function as Hand, because the last time King's Landing saw him, he was screaming in a courtroom about how he wished they all died.
And he was also a part of the army that burned the shit out of him.
Right. He's like, yeah, like, why? Like, everyone should hate him. They did hate him when he was Hand last time. They should hate him even more now. It's the worst choice for Hand.
Yara and the Dornish Prince hate him because they aligned themselves with Daenerys, and he had a hand in killing Daenerys.
Yeah.
Gendry should have no feelings. Samwell, I guess, should be okay with him. Samwell and Davos should be okay with him. And
he killed Davos' son, but
that's right, he did.
The show has forgotten that. They just, God, Like, they forgot that. But Sam and Tyrion, has Sam and Tyrion ever had a conversation?
Fuck, I don't even care anymore. I think maybe they should. Sam and Tyrion ever having a conversation? I don't know. No, I don't think so.
No, I don't think they've had a conversation. I mean, not alone. I think they were in the same like boardroom meeting at Winterfell, but
well, Sam doesn't give a fuck. Like Edmure Tully hates anything Lannister. He should. So
he should. Mm-hmm. So why would anyone? And that bugged me. The one line that bugged me the most was Edmure going, "Well, I suppose you think you should be king." And he says it not in a biting, sarcastic way. He says it in a, "We might be up for that idea" kind of way. You know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
You know. And I'm like, oh God, no one would think that Tyrion should be king. No one. And so he's like, oh, half the people would hate me. What a horrible idea. It's like, yeah, if he said that, it should have been a fucking sarcastic, like, biting line. Edmure definitely does not think that Tyrion should be king. He's a freaking Lannister. Lannister's ruined his family.
Mm-hmm. But the fact that Bran gets it, and everybody in attendance goes, why? You don't know him. Like, right. You don't even care about him. Right. Why is that even a topic? What's even more insulting is the last person not to say "I" is Sansa, and he looks over at Sansa with like, "Bitch, really?" And Sansa's like, "Well, the North, we're gonna be independent," and he's like, "Fine, whatever." He just said "fine, whatever," just so she would shut the fuck up, because he knew she would never shut up about it.
It's like the one person that would support him doesn't support him, and all the kingdoms that that want independence, like the Iron Islands and Dorne. Like, we're just like, I'm totally into this, like, great story, like, slogan. Mm-hmm. It's so fucking dumb. So horrible.
I guess it would have made sense if the Iron Islands and Dorne were like, these wars have weakened us, and we could really use the support by being together, united as one country. I guess that would make kind of sense, but Sansa coming in and saying, like, the North should be independent kind of ruins that a little, because why wouldn't the North also need that support? But at the same time, you could argue that it's so big, it's its own thing. It's always has been its own thing. It could help itself no matter what. But there's just so many like weird things about, like, especially Bran agreeing to it in the first place. Like, what?
So remember when I told you the leak, and I was like, Bran's gonna be on the Iron Throne, and you were like, how does that make sense? And I'm like, I don't know. Like, yeah,
it doesn't. It really doesn't. This is, like I said,
like, you'd have to go through it. Like, if you went through it familiar wise, like maybe if you said, well, this, Edmure, this is your nephew, and he's like, okay, and Sweet Robin, this is your cousin, oh, okay, and Sansa, this is your brother, okay, and in the Reach, like Sam, okay, I could see Sam. Like, because of their friendship being like, okay. So
right,
now
and Sam knows about his abilities.
Right. So, and then you've got Gendry, and then Gendry, like, because Gendry's influence from Arya, like, even though it doesn't really make sense that Gendry's in charge of the Stormlands, that's actually kind of stupid. Mm-hmm. But say Gendry is in charge of the Stormlands, because of Arya's influence on him, she could be like, no, say yes, say yes.
Like, maybe she looks at him and he looks at her and he goes...
Right. Yeah. And then it's all about, like, then we just have to come up with a reason. We would need some sort of line. Like, had they said, like, Theon died defending Bran because he believed Bran was important, and that Bran was worth saving. Had they said just some throwaway shit like that to Yara, maybe I would have bought it. But they didn't have any of that. They said, oh, he's got a great story about going to a fucking tree and back.
Not to mention, we've seen this in the book as well. People will, like, support others if their family members are involved. Like, Sweet Robin, Edmure, Bran is their family.
Yeah.
So them supporting Bran, even though, like, there's no immediate, like, stuff in it for them, there's still something in it for them. Not a lot, but it's still family on the throne.
Yeah, somebody said, the Tullys really won in the end.
Yeah. Yeah, that's true. Yeah, the Tullys really did win in the end. Wow.
Yeah. I mean, as you said, Catelyn got everything she wanted, right? Her daughter's a queen, her son is a king, her brother's a lord, her nephew's a lord, and Jon is often often forgotten. Catelyn got everything she wanted.
Catelyn got everything she wanted except to live.
Yeah. And for Robb to live. And for Ned to live.
And in a sense, like, if they did it the way you just said it, yeah, everybody kind of gets everything they want, with the exception of the new Prince of Dorne. He gets nothing because nobody cares.
Yara somehow gave up Reaving and Ironborn independence for what? I mean, realistically, she should start Reaving on the north. So, because in the book, there's still Reaving, but Reaving can't be done on the Seven Kingdoms, so they have to go out to the Stepstones. And so if the north is no longer part of the kingdom, she should be able to reave on them. So, open season.
I guess you could also argue that the North and the rest of Westeros have like a very close alliance. But how long is that alliance going to last when in like 100 years when Sansa's dead and Bran is dead?
I mean, that's the thing is Bran's, so we know that the after Bran dies, the new elected queen they're not going to be a Stark. But I imagine that the North is still going to have regular monarchy, and so Sansa's child will be ruling the North.
Right.
And then you won't have an alliance anymore. There's like,
True.
Yeah.
But to be fair, though, this is something I said in another episode of the podcast, the North never starts shit. They always get dragged into stuff. They never start it. So the North will always be its own independent thing, but they've always kept to themselves.
Yeah, but they do fight over things like over the sisters and things like that. Like,
amongst each other, kinda. Like really just amongst each other.
They fought with the Veil over control over the sisters.
How long ago was that, though?
Fairly not so long ago, actually. Like it was.
So, okay, fine. They fight with some of the Southern Lords, but not as often as the Southern Lords fight with each other. So you could, and
yeah.
I don't think that is in the show. So in the show, Sansa could argue that the North could be independent. We've never started wars. We've always been dragged into them, and we're tired of fighting the South's wars. We want to be our own independent thing. That would make sense.
Yeah, I mean, just the argument that like, oh, too much blood has been lost. Like, oh, like the Westermen and the Riverlanders haven't lost anybody. Go fuck yourself. Like we've all fucking lost people.
True. We've all lost people, but remember, the North has never started that conflict. It was always the Southern Kingdoms always starting the conflict. So that could be her argument. That part I get. And quite frankly, I will say I am getting a little ahead of myself. I did like Sansa's little crown, the direwolf. I thought that was really pretty.
Oh, it was very pretty.
Yeah, very pretty.
Very well designed.
So, the Great Council didn't make any sense. There should have been way more lords in attendance, way more lords and ladies representing all of Westeros.
So more people, they should have split up the dialogue. We didn't need fucking Tyrion talking that much.
We really didn't. And like I said, this final episode really should have been split into two parts because there's a lot of walking around, a lot of people doing nothing. I would have liked more like getting things done and ironing things out because there's a lot of unanswered questions in this episode. A lot of them. So Bran becomes king.
I couldn't believe I couldn't believe Tyrion got away with him with being like, it's not your decision to make to Grey Worm. Like he could just fucking slit your throat right there for that insubordination. It's not your decision. It's not your choice. Everything's about choice. You have to choose. Like there's some sort of like huge deep idea to the concept of choosing, even though that is the George R.R. Martin idea.
He really should have demanded a trial by combat and had Jon fight Grey Worm. Like, that would have been better. That's what people have been saying that they would have preferred. I gotta agree, like, trial by combat. Tyrion always does that, and that's how he gets away from everything, and, you know, as such.
Yeah.
But Bran making him Hand of the King, once again, that's a total fan move. The fans want him as Hand of the King, because...
I don't even think they did. That's the thing, is, like, this imagined fan move. Like, imagine what people want. You know, like when people are sitting down with Terminator 3 and they're like, let's do another Terminator 2, but instead of having like the cop guy, we're going to have a really hot chick. Yeah. Like it's imagining what Chad Summerchild would like. Mm-hmm. And it's like Chad Summerchild doesn't even want that. Like, yeah.
Well, to be fair, the reason I think everybody wants Tyrion to be Hand of the King is because they remember Tyrion from season 2, and that's some of his best stuff.
Yeah, but I would even argue that he wasn't a very good hand. But they make it. In the show they pump him up like he was a great hand. Varys, they have the specific scene where Varys sucks his dick and is like, you know what you were doing and all this.
It was Tyrion season 2 was probably the best we've ever seen Tyrion. Maybe a close second would be Tyrion season 1. Tyrion season 3 kind of falls off just a tad, but Tyrion season 4 also pumps it up as well. I would argue Tyrion season 2, season 1, then season 4, and since then he's just been kind of going downhill. But
he's been sitting around and saying t-shirt slogans.
Right. But no, that's what people loved Tyrion as Hand of the King, and they want to see him again as Hand of the King. So Bran makes him Hand of the King. And then the next scene is the small council. Everybody gets what they want. Brienne gets to be Kingsguard. Podrick gets to be Kingsguard for some reason. Bronn gets Highguard.
Even though she's sworn to Sansa.
Right. Bronn gets Highguard.
Somebody said, did you notice that she wrote in the book and then closed it with the wet ink?
Yeah, that was just...
Somebody else was like, wouldn't it have been cool if they said father to child with Brienne of Tarth? Had she wrote that. That would have been something.
That would have been interesting. But Bronn gets to be master of coin. Davos, of course, we got to give him master of ships because he knows ships. Like, remember that one scene where he was on a ship and he was commanding it and it blew up? So Davos knows ships.
Yeah, he knows ships.
He knows ships.
He hasn't been on a ship in freaking long time.
In many seasons.
Yeah.
What else? Who else is in charge? Sam, having only 2 Maester chain links, is Grand Maester.
Where did he get those? First of all, where did he get those chain links? When did he have time to get those chain links? I saw those chain links, but he's an acolyte. He doesn't have. He's not a freaking Maester. He's such an oathbreaker. He is. Whole wife and kid and
but we're willing to forgive him because he was in the battle for humanity during the Battle of Winterfell, so I guess we can forgive him for it.
Grand Maester. I mean, what does he have? I mean, what, like one chain in Ravencraft and the other, like, I'll grant that he could probably breeze through the Ravencraft class, pretty fast. But geez, like, when did he have time to study for this other link?
But he only has 2.
He only has 2, but that's still...
So, this is the third eye roll. The second one was Drogon melting the throne. The third eye roll is... Game of Thrones is not Lord of the Rings. Why are we doing Lord of the Rings? So, the Song of Ice and Fire book, really?
Yeah, that was stupid. And that's a fan theory that I've seen around, and I was like, you fucking stole it. Like, you fucking, took that from some, you went on some Reddit forum and you're like, oh, I'll do that. That's what the fans want.
In the books, correct me if I'm wrong, but isn't A Song of Ice and Fire, at one point, one character, I think it was, Jorah, who says, it's no song I've ever heard of, when someone directs it at him? You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah. Shit. It's after the House of Black and White, or the House of the Undying.
All I remember is someone mentioning it and Jorah saying it's no song I've ever heard of. That's all I remember from it. But it's not gonna. I'm assuming in the books it's not gonna be an actual book that some maester wrote.
Yeah. No. You know what it is I remember it now. It's so in the book, during the House of the Undying, Dany sees Rhaegar with Elia. And Elia has her child, and she's like, oh, are you going to write him a song? And he says he already has a song. He has the Song of Ice and Fire. And then she later asks Jorah, have you heard of this song? And Jorah says, it's no song that I've ever heard of. That's what it is.
Well, yeah, so apparently it's a book here, detailing everything that's happened ever since Robert won the rebellion. Or ever since since he won the rebellion, right?
Yeah, yeah. The wars. No, the wars after Robert's death. I think he said.
Right, right. And I like how the Maester doesn't mention Tyrion at all, which is the stupidest thing ever, because Tyrion, as far as anybody knows, killed Joffrey. Tyrion was Hand of the King to Joffrey as well. Tyrion was Hand of the Queen to Daenerys, who came over and burned everything. He was pretty much involved in a lot of the major points of history in the Song of Ice and Fire.
Yeah.
Yet he's not mentioned at all, which is funny because, correct me if I'm wrong, doesn't Tyrion have the most chapter of any person in the books?
He does.
Maybe, I think Arya or Daenerys is a close second.
Yeah, I think it's Tyrion. It depends how you count, if you go number of chapters versus number of pages and things like that. But it's Tyrion is number 1, and then I think Jon might move into number 2 because he had so many chapters in A Dance with Dragons. Arya might be number 2. She's really close. Dany is 4. But yeah, it's and Dany only because she had so many chapters. Because Dany has so few chapters in a Clash of Kings that she falls behind. Oh, by the way, I wanted to say that like a song doesn't mean like a written history. A song is usually in the archaic version of a song is like poetry. So unless like Maester Ebros wrote like the whole thing in like poetry stanzas, it's not really a song. But
I rolled my eyes so fucking hard when Sam brought it out, the Song of Ice and Fire, and it's just... That scene in general is probably the worst scene in the episode. Maybe running with the Great Council scene, because everybody gets what they want. I don't like. There's
only like
so
5
much.
scenes in the whole thing.
Which is so stupid. The ending of a fucking show that's been running for 10 fucking years really should have been 2 episodes, not 1. Really, it really should not have been. It should have been more
bittersweet. It should have been more bittersweet in the sense there should have been real loss at the end, where people were sad.
But everybody gets what they want. Tyrion gets to be Hand. Davos gets to be Master.
And the only thing that's kind of weird is that Bran is like looking for Drogon and Bronn kind of like gives him a weird look. Like, why would you be looking for Drogon? And I don't know why. This gets into the evil Bran theories, and stuff.
Okay, so Preston, let's talk about the final closing moments of the episode and of the entire series in general. Once again, I still feel as though we should have had at least, if they don't want to do 10 episodes, at least close out the entire series with 2 ending episodes. Because I feel like episode 5 was the dreaded episode. Every season of Game of Thrones has that same formula. The penultimate episode is the dreaded episode that changes the entire game, and then the final episode of that season closes out and we go into the next one. Because there is no other season, I feel as though we should have had 2 ending episodes. The first episode, in my opinion, would have been episode 6, deals with the fallout of Daenerys, and then episode 7 would be the Great Council and the fallout and a montage of every single character and what they're doing and what the future of Westeros looks like.
See, that's the thing. They did give us a montage. I was about to make a big joke about it because it's like, wait, why do you need a whole episode when we have a montage? But like, it's an odd thing, that they wanted to close out. They wanted all the characters there and then close it all out and find out what everybody was doing in the last episode, all in the last episode. Plus deal with the Daenerys stuff, which was a lot. But yeah, I'm more like, closing some plot threads earlier and then you don't have to deal with them later, Mm-hmm. Like there's no reason that everybody needed to be at the small council. Like they could have had Arya, for example, after the Battle of Winterfell, like go on her ship and like that be the end for Arya, like Arya didn't do anything in those last episodes. She rushes into the city. She rushes out of the city. She rushes to see Jon. She sits in a council, and then she goes on a ship. Like, she could have gone on that ship, earlier, and we could have had a goodbye for her earlier,
I think the beauty of Game of Thrones and A Song of Ice and Fire in general is the show. This is what the show gets wrong, in my opinion. The show makes the Starks the main protagonists, and in a sense, they kind of are. But at the same time, this is what the books do best, is give everyone their own favorite characters. When you talk to book fans, not everybody's a fan of Jon Snow. Not everybody's a fan of Arya. Not everybody's a fan of, like, all the Starks. You have people that are diehard Greyjoy fans. And when you tell someone who just watches the show, I love Euron, why? He's such a meh character. Yeah,
Right.
in the show, but in the books, oh my god. He's so interesting. He's got a lot going on. People love Yara in the books, who is Asha. Like, a lot of these characters in the books have their own personalities and their own things going on, whereas in the show, they're one-dimensional, and that's what the show gets wrong. So I would love a montage letting me know, like, what what Yara's doing. What's going on with the new Prince of Dorne? What about Gendry? How is he filling into his position as a Stormlord? What about Edmure Tully and, you know, all these other side characters? Like, because there are, like, what is Dario doing? Like, how is Dario holding up his position in Marine? Like,
Picnics, man. All picnics.
picnics. I would love a montage of Dario, like, being chased out by the Marinese people, like, you know, like with like a bunch of, like, gold in his hand or something.
Well, I mean, that's the thing, is viewers will never understand, like, the roller coaster that the books are, where the Game of Thrones, the first book, is definitely a Stark heavy book. You have 8 perspectives, and 6 of them, right, are Starks. I'm trying to do the count. You know, Ned, Cat, Arya, Sansa, Jon,
Bran.
Right, and then your two not are Tyrion and Dany, right? And then as time goes on, you have, you know, Theon, Davos, and Jaime added, and then you get the whole slew, you know, when it comes to Feast for Crows and A Dance with Dragons. This, you know, it becomes Ironborn and Dornish dominated, and it's you know, it's an interesting shift. It's an interesting shift to have the story go away from the Starks, but the show never did that. The show always, you know, it introduced the Lannisters earlier. It gave more Jaime and Cersei time earlier than the books offered. It gave more Theon time earlier because they didn't want to do phases. Like George R.R. Martin has phases for characters that phase in and phase out. The show did not want to do that. So all of the characters have to be there at all times, and, you know, everybody has to be. They have to close the chapter on everyone in the same episode. So. Yeah, and the Starks were never out. Like, it's interesting that, you know, for years, you know, you picked up A Feast for Crows, and, like, there's a couple Arya chapters and a couple Sansa chapters, but for the most part, you know, there's no Starks in it, you know, and even A Dance with Dragons, yeah, you got this Jon story where nothing happens, but you know, for the most part, it's all these other people. But yeah, I did feel that the Starks were the stars. They had the plot armor. We were never going to see them die. You know, and then at the end, it's a happy ending for them. They got everything they wanted.
Here's how I would end it. We would get a little montage, what everybody's doing with that song. We get to see Sansa, Arya, Jon, every single character. Gendry, Edmure, Yara, new Prince of Dorne maybe. I don't give a fuck. Davos, Bronn in his new role. And then as the song fades out, with Jon walking in the forest, we get the small council scene. And then we get that last scene that you told me about that never made it, where Jon and Tormund find the sign.
Yeah.
In the snow. So tell the audience about that, because I know a lot of people didn't watch the spoiler episode that we did a couple days before the finale.
Right. So there was a spoiler that came out that turned out not to be true. But what's odd is that everything around it was true, just not that aspect of it. You know, it's sort of like when we read those leaks from a couple years ago where everything was true except for Cersei's miscarriage.
Right.
And you're like, what happened? Like, did they change their minds about it? Because there was no miscarriage, and you know, the plot line went all the way until the end, until Cersei's death. But somehow that was the one thing that was incorrect. So I read these leaks, and nearly everything was correct. It was Jon has to go to the wall for killing Dany. He meets up with Tormund. The two of them like lead the wildlings north of the wall. Like that was all there. And then it was like, while exploring, they come across a bunch of bodies like in a formation, like in the woods, and they realize that the White Walkers are not gone, you know.
That would have been a very chilling end. And not only that, it would have set up the prequel in a fantastic way, because right now people are kind of pissed off about Game of Thrones. The way it ended was awful. Show fans and casual fans and book fans alike, book fans especially as always, but casuals as well. Casuals hated how the show ended. They hated it. Normally they're like all up in arms about it, about, you know, they're all happy about like every random decision the show does that we're kind of like on. But this is something that unites everybody. Like, that finale was fucking trash. What would have saved it was that whole, like, them finding the White Walker symbol in the snow.
And it would have made sense with Bran asking for Drogon. You would have been like, well, why do we even... Like, Drogon flies off, and he's gone, and we don't really care where he goes. Like, that's his exit, you know? But then Bran's like, let me see if I can find Drogon. Why? For what purpose? But had they found those bodies and you realized that the White Walkers weren't gone, you would have been like, well, this war is continuing on and Bran needs to get Drogon because he still needs to fight the White Walkers. You know, like, then it would have all made sense. Instead, Drogon's just like, let me see if I can find him. Like, why are you searching for Drogon?
Not only that, though, but once again, we're getting the prequel series focusing on the Long Night, which has to do with the Children of the Forest and the White Walkers. That ending would have been a perfect cliffhanger ending because there's a lot of mystery still surrounding the White Walkers, and the prequels is supposed to answer that. I would love if the way they did it was Jon and Tormund find the symbol in the snow, and in the prequels we find that the White Walkers, they are the bad guys, but the three-eyed raven is even more of a big bad than they are, and they're trying to destroy the raven because as long as the raven exists, they will still exist. Kind of like Mr. Meeksies. You know, they will always be there no matter what until the raven is dead. That's why they always go for the raven, because to them existence is painful. That's how I would make it.
Right. It's in their programming. The Children of the Forest, like, you know, have their programming to kill, you know, to send the White Walkers against somebody. And well, then the three-eyed raven, though, is the Children of the Forest's entity. I do wonder what happened, like why their little creation malfunctioned. Maybe they'll explain that in the Long Night, where, you know, they created the White Walkers to kill humanity, and then they went and they started killing everything, all life. So we don't know why. We don't know why that happened.
It's supposedly set like what, 1,000, 5,000, 8,000 years before.
Something like 8. Yeah, I would guess 8,000.
Right before the events of the show. So, if the White Walkers are that old, how come they're just now reemerging like 5 years ago in the show's time?
No, I mean, none of that was explained. Craster's Keep, nothing. Like, Craster's Keep, Children of the Forest, like, the Return of Dragons, like, why did this all happen? Mm-hmm. The visions, the resurrection of Jon. Like, why are people getting resurrected from the dead? Why did dragons come back? Why did the others suddenly come back? How did Craster set up this entire, like, system north of the wall? Why are there uneven seasons? Like, none of the fundamental mysteries of the story were solved at all.
That's probably why they chose to do the prequel, but the show had a fantastic moment to set it up, but they just didn't take it. They just didn't. So I don't know, man. It's just, it seems like a lot of missed opportunities, but at the same time, I don't know how I feel. Arya's ending, I really don't care. Her fucking boat could sink for all I give a fuck. I don't care. Yeah. Sansa had a pretty okay ending. Jon's ending just didn't make any sense to me. Like, I get it. He's always drawn towards the north, the quote-unquote true north, but just the way it ends with him just, you know, walking off with them into the forest, like, is he their new king now? Like, I don't... Like, what do I make of that? Like,
that's the thing is one, we don't even know if it's a desertion. It's probably a desertion, but why aren't, like, he just keeps walking. You're like, well, why don't the few Night's Watch people, like, stop him? They're on top of the wall. They can see for a long ways. Why don't they go, oh, crap, he's deserting. Let's go get him. But they don't. But say he is deserting. Is he becoming king in the north over that little squad? Maybe, probably. I guess.
Well, to be fair, though, most of the Night's Watch members came to Winterfell with Ed, and they're probably aware of, like, who Jon is, what he's done, and they're probably loyal to him to some extent, so I doubt they give a fuck what he does. For all they care, he can do whatever it is he wants. The nature of the Night's Watch has been changed.
I think most of the Night's Watch would be Shadow Tower, right? Like, if Castle Black came to the Battle of Winterfell and they all died. Well, Eastwatch is wiped out. Let's just essentially say that.
Mm-hmm.
Like, and then Castle Black is with Ed, but they arrived the day of the attack. The Eastwatch crew and the Castle Black crew.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm assuming the Shadow Tower crew never made it. So the Shadow Tower crew should be the largest crew. And they don't know who Jon is for the most. I mean, you know, they elected him Lord Commander and all of that, but
well, there were some Night's Watch guys who from Castle Black who did survive the Battle of Winterfell. Like, we do see guys in like Night's Watch outfits there during the feast. So my assumption is, even if he is like ranging or deserting, I don't think any of them care, because the whole war with the wildlings, that's all done. Who gives a fuck? And I don't think any of them really care. I'm sure the Night's Watch at this point is just going to be served as like exile for certain people.
Yeah, it's such a silly thing. I mean, the scene was rather meta when Jon says there's still a Night's Watch, because that's us, the audience, going, there's still a Night's Watch.
Yeah,
like, it's lampshaded. And then he says, oh, there's always going to be a place for bastards and broken men. It's like, well, I mean, you don't really have an official like mission for them. The wildlings aren't really wild anymore, and there's no White Walkers, and there's a hole in the goddamn wall. So what are you gonna do? And there's no one alive for the wildlings to raid on. You know, like, that's the other thing. Like, there's no Umbers left to even raid on. So it's what's the point of the Night's Watch? I don't know.
It's just a lot of I'm someone who's a minor details guy. After the Battle of Winterfell and during the whole feast ceremony thing, I was looking for who was left alive. Like, during the whole during like battles and stuff like that, I'm looking at shields, like which houses are involved in which fighting. And I noticed that during the Battle of King's Landing, when Dany starts destroying everything, I see some Vale soldiers in there with Jon's army. So, like, I'm all about those types of details. Like, I want to know the names of every lord in attendance at the Great Council. Like, that's the kind of, you know, I'm into that stuff like that. And this bothers the living shit out of me, that these small details are never going to be answered. Like, why is this? Why is that? Who's here? Who's there? Because there are a lot of places in the north, as well as in most of Westeros, that have been destroyed, wiped out, and there are no more families there. How do those positions get filled? Who gets those lands?
Right. Like, we never found out who takes the Dreadfort.
That I was just about to say that, because I would have loved the scene with Sansa just saying, like, tear it down and make sure nothing grows there ever again, you know, or give it to someone else, or have it be like, just like have it just be like a giant ruin as a monument of what happens when you fuck with the Starks. Something, you know? But that never came true.
But now, yeah, it's just there's so many empty lordships and everything. I mean, I guess, you know, everybody's going to split up the land, and the very few Northerners that are left are going to be super rich. I guess, if they can get people to farm their land.
So, Preston, in conclusion, this was probably one of the worst episodes of Game of Thrones ever. Like, this entire season, once again, I've said this before, I'm going to say it again. Season 8 is Godfather Part 3 bad. It is not Tommy Wiseau's The Room awful. But this episode is Tommy Wiseau's The Room awful. It was truly an awful episode. A lot of it
I was about to say,
sense.
like, you know, it's much worse than Godfather 3.
much worse than Godfather. It's Batman and Robin having a bat credit card awful. Like that.
Yeah, it's Batman. It's Batman and Robin. Like, because it's ridiculous and a farce. You know, like,
you're right. It is.
It's just like there's no logic. There's no the story doesn't make any sense at all. You know, they're wrapping everything up just quickly, and yet it's boring. It was a disaster on so many levels.
I think that's the most egregious thing, is that for the final episode of Game of Thrones, it was boring. And I normally don't say that. Like, I normally don't say, like, well, because this is something you complain about a lot. Like, you always say nothing happened, and I'm always the guy that goes, well, nothing did it not happen. I mean, stuff happened. It's just, you know, it didn't move along at a certain pace. But you're right here. Nothing happened.
The problem. So we get in these hype trains, right? Where you know, everybody's like, oh my God, we're gonna have this reunion between Sansa and Jon at the Wall. They're finally gonna see each other, and they've got so much to talk about. And then we finally get that Sansa-Jon meeting, and they sit around like drinking soup. And she's like, sorry, I was mean to you. And like, they don't talk about anything. And then you're like, oh my God. And then all these characters are together, and they have like these long dinner scenes where no one says anything. And you're like, you know, and they have them on the cover of Entertainment Weekly. Stark family reunion. Oh my God, so much is going to go down because they're finally together. And it's like, nope. They stand around a tree, and Bran says to Sansa that she was really beautiful the night she was raped, and like, just nothing. You know, like, you could have all sorts of interesting conversations and dramatic tension between these characters, and instead they just sit around and say nothing. You know, people could be arguing in rubble, you know, after that battle, screaming at each other and being emotional, but instead it's just sad walking. Ugh. You know what's really funny is Dany's little conversation about Viserys, where she saw the throne, and then she turns to Jon, and she starts talking about the number of swords and how she's like super happy, and she's talking about Viserys. Like, that was like one of the few moments of the episode where my interest peaked, where I was like, oh, somebody's talking about something. Like there's emotion. She's talking about her past, and then Jon cuts her off so that they can talk about nothing. You know. Oh God. Yeah, I mean, it's just, I don't know. It's just, you just kind of sigh at this point.
It really is neglect. It really is. Like, once again, people in the comment section of a fucking YouTube video just writing what they would have done in this position of the writers, even they have better ideas than people paid to do it. It's neglect. It's almost as though they don't give a fuck. And I almost don't want to believe that they don't give a fuck, because, come on, you guys are paid to make one of the greatest television shows of all time. Yeah. How do you, like, not give a fuck at this point?
You're professional writers. You spent, this is your craft.
Yeah. Like, this is what you do. Like, how do you... I would argue, this is something a lot of YouTubers have told me in private. They like, a lot of YouTubers, when they first start out, they're all like, yeah, YouTube, yeah, let's get in there. And they do their videos, and it gets rave reviews, but there's always that 1% of people who bitch and complain about nothing. Despite there could be 1,000 comments. 99% of them, 99.9% of them are, like, fantastic. But there's always that, you know, that 0.1% who's just not satisfied with one stupid thing, and you always focus and, like, go in on that. And it kind of does ruin your enjoyment sometimes. And maybe you could argue that some of the writers went online and saw, like, you know, people bashing the show for what it is, and maybe this was their fuck you to everybody bitching about the show.
No, I mean, I don't know what happened. I truly believe that they wanted to put out something good. If I were really to say, like, what happened is they had these plot points, and they needed to get characters from A to B, and they didn't know how to get them from A to B because they were just told, well, they're at A and they're at B. You know, like Carmine, I want you to write a story. Mm-hmm. And, you know, in this story, he's gonna have a crazy cross country adventure. He's gonna start in New York City, and he's gonna end up in L.A. And in the middle, he's gonna find an alien, you know, somewhere in Kansas. Mm-hmm. And this is pretty much the story. Okay. And you're like, and then you get this writer and he's like, crap, like I've got to get this guy from New York to LA, and he's got to find an alien in Kansas. And I think they're scared to add much more because they're like, well, if we add too much more, it's no longer an adaptation of George R.R. Martin's stuff. But all he's given me is the New York, the Kansas alien, and the LA. So they pop him in a car and they have him driving, and then he arrives in Kansas and he immediately gets this alien, and then he ends up in LA, and you're just like, well, nothing happened in that story. Well, because it was just explained to me like quickly, like the general plot. And it's like, well, you didn't develop any of the texture. You didn't explain how and why he went from New York to Kansas, like, and where this alien came from, and, you know, why he decided to go to LA. And there was no creative process in any of that. You were just trying to crap out what someone had quickly summed up their story as. And I think maybe that was the problem, is that they really just wanted to sum up George R. R. Martin's story without telling a story, without going through building character development, creating character tension, like getting there, like putting their heart and soul on a page. They just wanted to get the events out.
They wanted to hit those three major beats, which is Hodor, Shireen, and what was the last one?
Probably Danny.
Danny dying.
Yeah.
So in hindsight, they probably should have just covered everything George had down on paper and then done everything themselves, because even George Martin said that the ending is going to be somewhat similar but with different beats. At this point, I would just rather the show do its own thing, go its separate ways,
Absolutely. And the thing is, what George said, we can't believe what George says, because he's also said that, like, well, also keep in mind that there's a butterfly effect. Like, right now, he plans on ending it the same way, but as he writes, you have no idea what's going to happen.
Mm-hmm.
And if he even gets to the ending, because come on.
Everybody keeps saying the same thing, but go ahead.
Well, I mean, what do we expect? Like, let's be optimistic and say, he claims that, Winds of Winter is going to be out next year. Okay, 7 years to write another book after that. 8 years to write another book after that. And for a story that we all know cannot be summed up in 2 books.
You don't know that. I mean, Winds of Winter could have literally insane things happening every chapter. You don't know that.
And if that happened, it would be as bad as season 8.
That's a good point.
Like, we know that it takes time to get the characters from one place to another.
Yeah, I don't really know what. Well, Jon is dead, so they could pretty much.
Honest to God, if George R. R. Martin wanted to improve the story, he would keep Jon dead. He's not going to keep Jon dead, but it would be like Jon's story, like, it's a fine arc if you leave it as it is. He tried to do the right thing. He got killed for it at the end, and then just go on with the story without him. Like, we've got Melisandre to tell the story of the North. We have Theon to tell the story of the North. We have Asha to tell the story of the North.
And Davos.
We have Davos to tell the story of the North. We have Bran to tell the story of the North. We don't need Jon. We have every area covered. We've got north of the Wall with Bran. We've got the Wall with Mel. We've got Winterfell with Theon. And we have Davos off somewhere.
But who's going to face off against Ramsay?
Stannis.
Yeah, but
Asha,
Theon. Yeah, I guess, but
I mean, wouldn't it be so much more interesting if, even if you don't like Stannis, wouldn't it be fantastically interesting if somehow Asha pulled out some sort of situation where she ended up conquering the North again? Wouldn't that be fucking crazy?
That would be a little fucking crazy. Yes.
Yeah.
I mean,
and then imagine Davos following around Asha. That would be fucking insane.
that would be strange bedfellows, but I mean,
right. But that was one of the brilliant things about the move of taking Stannis and having him suddenly show up at the wall in the book. And what a shock it is. Mm-hmm. Where you're taking this character from one area of the story and then suddenly he's getting thrown up in a different area and everything's getting mixed up, you know, and that was really cool. But I don't know, but are we gonna see that sort of adventure and unexpectedness? I hope so. It's George R.R. Martin's MO. It's so odd for him to be writing a story that everyone seems to know the ending to.
Yeah.
When his whole thing is subverted expectations and like surprising people.
I almost wish the showrunners just did their own thing. Actually, you know what? Yeah, I do wish the showrunners just did their own thing. Like, you can tell, like, they probably didn't want this and this to happen, but they followed through with it anyways. They should have just done their own thing. They really should have. Even if it would have been Hollywood and cliche, which a lot of Thrones after season 5 was Hollywood and cliche. That's fine. If it's gonna suck, and at least do your own thing. Just say you tried.
I'm sure the showrunners didn't want to do Evil Dany.
No, they probably
I'm sure they didn't want to. You know? I mean, they spent all of these years like doing glorious music and making her a protagonist and all of this, and then all of a sudden they're like, no, you've got to make her evil at the end. What? Ah, crap. We've got to somehow throw this in. How? I don't know. I'm sure the showrunners didn't want to have Jaime go back to Cersei.
Yeah. It really does fuck up his character arc. Like I said, the one thing that he says that really ruins the whole character for everybody who's a Jaime fan is when he says, "I never really cared about the innocents." Like, come on, dude, really?
Right. Yeah, I never really liked him.
But that contradicts everything you fucking said in season 3 during the bathhouse scene with Brienne.
Right. Like, and they could have had, you know, Tyrion say something like, "You don't mean that. What are you saying?" You know, they could have had that kind of thing, like, you know, you're just trying to get a rise out of me or something. Mm-hmm. But yeah,
the only character that actually stayed true to form, I think, in this entire show is Davos. And if you think about it, any progression Davos went through as a character didn't ruin his storyline in the end. Like, Davos is still Davos at the very end, and nobody's complaining about it because it was just fine.
Yeah, but what was weird is that he kept becoming happier as the story went on. He kept becoming, you know, it starts out, he's a pretty serious guy. And then all of a sudden he's like, jolly old Davos, with his like little colloquialisms and shit. You know, he's ecstatic at the end. You know, where's your wife, Davos? Like,
what's your wife? You're the only person who remembers, like, these minor things. Like, you really are.
Like his wife and Salladhor Saan? What?
Salladhor Saan is a good name for songs. By the way, I think everybody forgot that Davos had a son. I honestly do. I even forgot that he had a fucking son. And I forgot that Tyrion is the one that's responsible for his death.
Yeah, well.
Tyrion and Bronn, technically.
Yeah.
Who are now both in the small council.
It's sad. And Roy Dotrice.
Oh, Roy Dotrice. Presley, why do I feel so empty that this fucking show it ended this way? Like, you're supposed to feel a sense of fulfillment when the show ends, but no, like, they really dropped the ball. This is the worst episode of this entire show. It really is. It really is.
Like, worse than when Arya was running through the streets,
like the Terminator.
Wave. Yeah, because it is worse because a lot of people really liked her whole clever turning out the candle thing.
That was clever,
to kill the wave.
Yeah, that was pretty cool. But the whole thing, like, I am Arya Stark and I'm going home, and then the very next season completely ruins her character. Like, season 7 makes her like just a completely different person than she was last season.
Season 7, she was just the schizophrenic thing. Like, what the hell? Mm-hmm. Completely different character, hating on Sansa, like acting really weird in front of Hot Pie. Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean...
You're so sad. You're so sad.
It really is sad because I don't know what's wrong with me, man. Like, or maybe it's just the world. But as I get older, I just notice everything just sucks. Everything.
Well,
it's
sucks. Odd. I mean, it is very much life in general. Like most things in life, you really love it, and then you stick with it long enough to the point where you start hating it. Like that's just. There's so many things in my life that were like that. You know. Like, so I used to go, when I was a young man, I went to summer camp every year, and I loved my summer camp. I fucking loved it. And I went to my summer camp every year, and then eventually I got old enough that I became a camp counselor, and I was a camp counselor there, and I had a really bad experience as a camp counselor with the management, like running the place. And I mean, the kids were great. The other counselors were great, but the management, they were just bad. And so now, like that entire memory of like years and years and years going to camp and then becoming a camp counselor at the end, like it's a little, it's like soured. Like everything, if you stick with anything long enough, it always gets soured.
I just don't understand why these fucking television. This is one of the reasons why I refuse to watch shows that have more than like 10 to 13 episodes, because I know it's just a lot of it's going to be filler, a lot of it's going to be crap. Like I have a friend of mine, she's super into Riverdale, and like the first season of Riverdale had like 10 episodes and was great.
Yeah.
And then as the seasons went on, they tacked on more episodes and it started to fucking suck. And she's bitching about it. I'm like, I told you. I told you. Whenever they add more episodes, it starts to suck. Whenever a show gets dragged on too long, like The Walking Dead, it just starts to blow dick.
This was Mark David Chapman's defense when he killed John Lennon in court. I don't know if you know. I don't know if you know this.
I don't. His defense. What was his defense?
So Mark David Chapman killed John Lennon, and his defense was Catcher in the Rye.
Right. Yeah.
That if he killed John Lennon when he was still innocent, he'd be always like remembered as being innocent. Which the plot of Catcher in the Rye is, the kid's younger brother dies when he's like 11, and so he always remembers his brother as being innocent, and so he like weirdly wants to go out and protect people's innocence. And so this was his like argument that I killed John Lennon to save him, because had he not killed John Lennon, there would have been some Beatles reunion, and it would have been hokey, and they would have been a fucking joke, just like every other old band that's still going around, trying to make money. So that was, of course, it didn't work. It was psychotic. And they put him in jail.
I know he killed John Lennon because of Catcher in the Rye, but I didn't know that was like the reason that he gave.
Yeah. I mean, the title Catcher in the Rye is he's got Holden Caulfield has this dream that he's this guy at the edge of a cliff, and there's these kids playing in a rye field, and that he's going to catch them before they can fall off the cliff. And so that he's obsessed with protecting children from innocence. And part of this, the big part of this, is the fact that his younger brother died, when he was still young, and so he never had any sort of like idea of him being corrupted through aging. And so that was his Mark David Chapman's argument for it, and kill John Lennon to save him.
Before we wrap up this podcast, because I know we've been going on for a long time. I'm going to ask you this one question. This is the question that not a lot of people are asking, but I'm going to ask you. Whose fault is it that Game of Thrones sucks? Is it Dave and Dan's, or is it HBO? Because originally Dave and Dan wanted 70 episodes, 70 hours for the entire show. When HBO came in, they said, no, give us 8 seasons. Not 7 seasons, give us 8. Give us 8 seasons, 10 episodes each if you can. They said, no, we want to do 7 episodes, 10 episodes each season. HBO says, no, give us 8. Come on, we'll give you more money. So Dave and Dan around season 5, season 6 were forced to stretch out certain things. That's why it seems that's why season 7 and 8 seem so incoherent. So they were forced to take certain elements. I will even argue season 6, a lot of the episodes also felt a little incoherent, a little slow from time to time. That's why I hate season 6 so much, because half the episodes were fucking trash.
Yeah.
So, well, whose fault is it? Is it Dave and Dan, or is it HBO for wanting more?
No, I mean, I'm going to say that the lion's share of the fault is with Dave and Dan, but I do think I'm going to place some blame on George R.R. Martin. And I place some blame on George R.R. Martin because he kept saying that, oh, my book is going to come out soon. My book is going to come out soon. And so Dave and Dan held off on sending the show in an original direction, which is why, like, season 6 is a replay of season 5, because they're like, oh crap, we've run out of material. Let's have every character run in place, you know, so to buy ourselves a year so we can get Winds of Winter, and then we'll have material again. Which is why, like, you know, the battle for Meereen happens twice. The battle for Winterfell happens twice. Like, everything happens twice in seasons 5 and 6. So it's Arya's just at the House of Black and White, you know. And so I do think they had consciously made this decision that they were going to do an adaptation. They were going to take George's material and adapt it. And then when they were told, oh, I'm going to get more material, and then they didn't get more material, they were rushed, they were panicked, they didn't know what to do. They got these plot points, and they wanted to stick to the plot points. You know, I do think it's mostly Dan and Dave's fault, but I somewhat know that Dan and Dave, when given their own creative free will, can produce something, you know, because it's not like their books are bad. X-Men Origins Wolverine is bad, but maybe that's it. Maybe what's weird is they've been doing adaptations and they're really bad at adaptations.
Well, I have to disagree with you there, because what happened, let's say season 6 comes out. Let's say the end of season 5 is here. Season 6 is about to start filming. They're about to start writing it and start filming it. And then Winds of Winter releases. Well, let's assume that they get Winds of Winter before it's out to the public. Okay, fine. They have material for season 6 and season 7. Then what are they going to do with season 8? There's no Dream of Spring.
Right. I mean, they're just hoping that in that time George R.R. Martin would crap out another book or something, because he keeps saying things like, "Oh, I can write a book in a year." Well, no, you can't. You can't write a book in 8 years. But you know, they kept believing it. You know, when this writer sits down, this writer that that you respect, that you're adapting his work, and he tells you like, "Oh, I'm going to have this material for you," and then he doesn't produce it. You know, so it's not like I don't sympathize with their position a little bit. But they should have been bold enough to write their own story.
I don't know, man. I agree with you on that point, but I don't know. I think HBO should get the lion's share of the blame, because Dave and Dan originally, from the very start, wanted 70 episodes, and HBO wanted them to stretch it out to 76. So I gotta lay the fault mostly on HBO, because had HBO not wanted to extend the entire show an extra season, maybe we would have gotten a more coherent story where they didn't have to stretch out storylines.
Yeah, I mean, you're right. I mean, it's yeah, I mean, there's a lot of things that I guess, you know, that they had to deal with the adaptation that we just can't see. That if we sat down with them and saw it from their perspective, we'd go, "Oh, okay." You know, so if we go back to like all the small problems of seasons 1 and 2, for example, the biggest complaints people had about seasons 1 and 2 was that you had these extra characters like Roz and Theon doing nothing, because Theon doesn't have a role in a Game of Thrones for the most part. And so, but they didn't want to introduce a character like Theon in the second season and just have him be an extra in the background, like the books did. So they gave this like Roz Theon plot to like give Theon some extra screen time and random scenes here and there, or random scenes for Jaime and Ned, you know, and things like that, because they didn't want to do the whole phasing characters thing. And so it's like, and so I understand why those problems came about. Like, well, what do you do when actor contracts work a certain way and you have this actor and he's standing around and you feel like you should utilize him, you know? And so you write a scene for them and the scene doesn't really fit and it's just killing time. So it's, I guess they were smart in that they didn't have Bran appear for an entire season. But, you know, say you're Dan and Dave and someone says, okay, well, one of the big plot points is that Arya is going to kill the Night King. Oh, great. Okay. So she finishes with the Hearts of Black and White and then she's going to go kill the Night King. What do we do with her in the meantime? I don't know. And they have to sit down. They're like, well, we have this actor on contract and people are going to wonder where she is for an entire year. But what do we do with her between the time of the Night King and like her leaving the House of Black and White? And so they fill time with her for a year and a half.
Oh, man.
I mean, that's the thing is they weren't good with, like, they were hindered by, there were certain restrictions. George R. R. Martin's plot points, George R. R. Martin not giving them the story, HBO, actor contracts, things like that.
Yeah, well, at the end of the day, it is what it is, and all we can do now is look forward to the prequel, which I hope will be better. But quite frankly, I don't give a fuck about Westeros 8,000 years ago. I really don't. I love the political struggles. I love the political intrigue. I love the house wars against each other. I don't really care much about the White Walkers. Yes, I want those situations and those mysteries to be explained, but at the same time, I would rather see Targaryen versus Targaryen. I would rather see Stark versus Baratheon. I would love to see stuff like that, and we're not going to get it. These questions that we're asking about, like, whose fault it really is, can only be answered in one of two ways. 10 years down the line, when someone, a part of the show's internal system, writes a book or someone releases a documentary or whatever, like an actual documentary, not a documentary that they're going to release, like, in a couple weeks of them patting themselves on the back about, like, you know, how long it took of the show and all the actors and like, I don't care about that. I want to know, like, what went on behind the scenes. Were there like people behind the scenes that hated each other? Like, that's what I want to know. Or there's a person inside the organization who's anonymous who leaks information. I'm a big fan of the Stern Show, as some of you might know, the Howard Stern Show. And ever since 2011, Howard Stern has been fucking awful. He's been very politically correct, and he's just pretty much shed his old persona. And there have been multiple times where someone from the Stern Show on Reddit in an anonymous forum have released information regarding what happened to Howard and how he became this way. And it's very disturbing, but it makes a lot of sense as to what the hell we're seeing. That's what I would like to happen with Thrones now. Someone from inside coming in and shedding light on all these internal struggles that led to the show being as bad as it is.
Oh, well.
I know. Preston, will you join me again next week on your channel and so we can discuss the entirety of Season 8?
Of course, of course.
Guys, thank you so much for joining us. And Preston, also thank you for joining me for this episode of the Thrones Podcast. We will see you guys next time. Have a good one.